South Africa. I don't know about the Shiraz. They may do it, but the Pinatage is it's very unique to South Africa because of grape.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people know that about South Africa.
No.
Well, all right. So it is 12:35. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I think this will be a very good discussion we're having today. Somebody is not on mute right now. You might need to be. So I'm going to ask, actually, Babs, can you just put people on mute for the moment until they get ready to speak? All right, very good. So welcome to Clinical
Dr. Davis, I muted you too. You're gonna have to unmute.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna go through all that again. No! All right. So welcome to the Clinical Consultation Network, everybody. So glad you could be here today. And today my co-host is going to be our Director of Therapeutic Services, Karen Wills. We're also going to have a Lord of the Rings trilogy of creative solutions for custom equipment design. I'm so happy to have with us today Estelle Stridham, who is an OT in the East Tennessee region. East Tennessee region, correct? Yes. And also Danielle Osborne, who's in the East Tennessee region, and she is an occupational therapist. And then we have in the West Tennessee region, Andrew Hinkle, who is going to be with us today to talk about some creative solutions they've come up with in equipment design. So happy that you could be with us today, Estelle, Danielle, and Andrew. Now, as we get started, I know all of you are very experienced in doing services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, designing equipment and so forth. And your background as in your bios will explain a lot of that. But for each of you, before we get started, I would like for you to share about yourself a fun fact that a lot of people may not know about you. And so with that, we'll start with Estelle and Danielle, who are in the same room there together, it appears. So you two, can you just share with us maybe a little bit more about yourself and that fun fact?
Okay. So I'm an occupational therapist, and I moved down here about 8 years ago. I am from South Africa. I'm a South African-born American. I am a citizen of the United States of America. And a fun fact is the fact that I am one of 256 people with the last name of Strydom in the United States. Out of the whole population, there's only 256.
Wow, that is quite amazing. I'm a Davis, so there are only millions of me, but so that's quite unique. And 256 is some kind of a computer number there, like 64 times 4 is 256, and 256 times 2 is 512. So there's probably some greater significance to the fact that there are 256 people.
Maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
That is a very fun fact, though. I'm going to remember that from now on.
Cool.
All right, Danielle, how about you? Now, I'm not hearing you, Danielle, for some reason. Maybe you're going to need to get closer to the speaker.
Okay, better. Can you hear us now?
I can hear you, yes. What? That's the weirdest thing I've ever seen, because there's no sound coming out. Or no, I'm sure it's coming out on your end. Or are you faking me out by just acting like you're speaking right now?
No.
I heard a dash of what you said there. I'm gonna I won't. Maybe y'all need to switch places for a second.
He is messing. He is messing with us.
No, I'm really not messing with you now.
I never.
Okay, well, get up close and speak loud.
Any better?
Yeah, I can hear you a little bit.
Okay.
All right, Babs, you got to fix this problem.
Okay, let's turn the computer and have it directly in front of you while you're presenting or while you're talking. All right, now try.
Okay, any better?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm Danielle, and I work here in East Tennessee. I'm a wife and a mom of 2 girls, and this is my 3rd clinical consultation network, and it should probably be my last because there's not a lot of fun facts to share about myself. Um, I will say my daughter and I, my oldest daughter, we have decided to do some online sign language classes. Getting ready to start and try and see how it goes.
Now that was like that part of Forrest Gump when they pulled out the cords, because when you said the critical piece of information, it bottomed out.
Oh my goodness.
And that's all I got to say about that.
Right.
No, what was your fun fact again, Bill?
My daughter.
All
You're
right,
gonna have
y'all
to
are the
move
ones.
to the center of the keyboard because that's where the microphone is. There you go.
Any better?
Yes.
Oh, this is terrible. My daughter and I are going to take online sign language classes together, just to learn it, just to learn a new trick, learn a new skill.
All right, that's cool. Yeah, very good fun fact, and one that will pay dividends for the people you support, I'm sure. All right, very good. And Andrew, we'll move over to you. You can briefly introduce yourself and share your fun
Yes.
fact.
Well, my name is Andrew Hinkle. I worked for DIDD in the seating and positioning clinics for 4.5 years. And fun fact about myself, I actually taught myself how to juggle when I was 10 years old. So that's about as exciting as it gets for me. But I've been able to impress
still
people.
juggle?
I can. I
Okay.
should probably have brought something to prove that today, but
Well,
I do.
if
Once in a
things
while, I amuse people with it.
if things start to go poorly during your
No.
presentation, you can just pull out your juggling act. That'd be
That's right.
that'd be a
That's
great
right.
way to pick it up.
We could have, maybe I should have juggled a minute ago, right?
Yeah.
You're not on audio.
I had a similar skill that I learned. I learned to ride a unicycle.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
Except I never learned to turn it, so I could only go one direction with it. That was the only problem I had with that. But in any case, all right, that's great though. Good fun fact.
All right.
And one that you will be called upon to show at some later point, though. Not
Next
today.
time. Next time.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for your introductions. Now we'll move on and let Karen Wills come in here, and she's going to present today's Get Smart.
All right. Well, it's great to be here. I'm excited for everyone to see the case studies that the therapists are going to present. They did these for our own therapists. We have a monthly meeting where we all get together, and they were very interesting to all of our own clinical staff, so we thought we would share them with everybody else. So I just want to take a few minutes to share and work through, and let me get the slideshow going, an article that I found really interesting. It's a more recent article, and honestly, it's really challenging to find quality research articles on what we talk about in terms of positioning and its impact on people. So the purpose of presenting this article is that it provides evidence supporting the need for therapeutic positioning, and it highlights issues caused by what we'll talk about as the long-term use of a quote-unquote preferred posture. And I'll use that in quotes throughout this brief discussion because a lot of us think about preferred as something that we really want to do, but in this case, the way it's used is not quite what you would think of. So the study was done in Sweden. I am not going to name these folks. The title is Preferred Posture in Lying with its association with scoliosis, windswept hips in adults with cerebral palsy. So, and Babs going to put it is available online. Babs is going to put that in the chat. She may have already done that. So the objective of the study was to clarify the association of scoliosis and windswept hips of adults with cerebral palsy with their level of immobility, a lying position, so lying down, and the time they spent in the lying position. So what is preferred posture? So preferred posture is going to be described as a habitual posture. And being the very visual person that everybody knows that I am, that knows me, I am going to show you some pictures. But it's basically the posture that you're going to return to on a natural basis if you don't have any supports and if you are repositioned. And then it is also one where your body begins to adapt. So where tissues begin to change, where muscle length begins to change. And so over time, you're going to see changes. So we all have preferred postures, and a lot of times we're not even aware of them. So think about how you like to sleep at night. Some of us like to sleep on our back. Some of us like to sleep on our side, some on our stomach. Maybe how you sit in a chair and whether you tend to cross your legs and whether you cross your right leg over your left or your left leg over your right. So those are some examples of our preferred postures and things, again, that we don't really plan for or think about. So when you have physical disabilities enter the picture, most individuals that have physical disabilities and cannot reposition themselves, then their posture is also going to be impacted even more so by gravity and then how long you stay in a position. So, and then there are studies that indicate that these preferred postures begin before an infant is even born and that they continue throughout the lifespan for individuals with disabilities to have impact. So this is an example of preferred posture. Our clinicians also call this tends to posture. And so it's what you tend to do when you're lying, and every evaluation that we do captures what the person looks like when they're lying on their back. So you can see this person's hips and knees kind of go to his left, his arms go up above him, they're bent at the elbows, you can see the hands, and then you can see a little bit about what happens when this person turns onto their side, and this is all unsupported. So what is windswept? I use that term. The study talks about the term, and I stole a picture with Andrew's permission because you're going to get to learn more about Liana. And you can see that if you look straight at her, her knees and hips and legs go off to the right side. So that's an example of what windswept is, and what you're going to see is that it impacts how well a person can sit in a wheelchair. This is an example of what can happen with preferred posture over time. This young person is in elementary school age, and you can see that allowed to not be supported in a position has created a significant C-curve in her spine, and her head is very hyperextended, and so it can create a lot of health issues. And then this is another picture from another view where you can see the C-curve and the impact in the skeletal picture of what scoliosis can do. And our therapists do tons and tons of training, but one of the things that you will hear them talk about is, and in general, is that whatever's happening on the outside is impacting the inside. So this is a great example. This is a picture of over time. So you can see that this is an x-ray of the chest capacity, the rib cage, starting out at age 3, moving to 10, 17, 21, and 23, and the impact of scoliosis. The lungs are impacted, the digestive system is impacted, and this person unfortunately died an early death at 23. So what did these folks do? They looked at data. I think this is so awesome, but in Sweden, actually Norway and Denmark, they have a register, and it's a cerebral palsy register. So this particular study looked at individuals with cerebral palsy. And they have people registered into this registry at in infancy. And so, and then they keep annual data on everything from range of motion to how that person has been impacted by their cerebral palsy. So 830 adults, a median age of 23. In the study, there were physical and occupational therapists that assessed range of motion, and then the person and or people close to them helped them self-report how they lie, what position they would lie down in when they were sleeping or resting, and how long they spent in that position over a 24 hour. So the results of the study, you can see here, adults with CP who are immobile and do not have support when they're lying down have an increased risk of scoliosis and windswept hips, and than those who can change their position. If they lie down for more than 8 hours, then it's an increased risk of scoliosis. So more than 8 hours a day, a lot of people sleep between 8 and 12 hours a day. And then lying only in supine without supports increases the risk for the wind sweeping of the hips. So individuals who cannot move on their own, in the habitual or preferred posture, this study supports that it leads to a distorted body shape. And it's impacted furthermore by how much time they spend in that position and the effects of gravity. And it supports the postural supports in lying to begin at a young age. And so for us, I think about, you're going to hear these stories and you're going to see these creative solutions to positioning, not exactly everything that was in this study, but it's very relevant in terms of how and why we do and promote therapeutic positioning supports, and why we're really starting and trying to support these long-term, starting when children are young, because ultimately it can keep them from getting to these incredibly distorted positions that some individuals that you saw pictures of end up having to be challenged with. So the other thing you're going to see is why we feel it's really important to involve the person in decision making. And you're going to see some really cool examples of that. But the bottom line is that how we want to do things is how we want to do things. And so the more that we can involve people in prioritizing their positioning and making them comfortable in the way they want to be and in the environment that they want to do that in, the more likely we are going to have increased acceptance. All right, so I am going to switch to and turn it over to Estelle.
One of 256 stridums in the United States.
Yes.
That's, 'Amazing. 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 'Amaz
All right, Estelle, you're muted.
Okay. Thank
There
you,
you
sir.
go.
Well, it's really a privilege to be here, and thank you for the opportunity. I just want to tell you guys a little bit today about Miss Kelly. Miss Kelly was somebody that I've seen twice. So we had two, not only two times, but two episodes of care that we have. And the very first time I saw her, she was this feisty little lady, short. She was, I think, maybe 4'11", just a tiny little thing, walking in here and laughing and just really having a good time. And the idea was that we were just going to give her a transport wheelchair because she was getting tired very quickly. And when we got the wheelchair and we had to fit her, had to do the final fit, that was not something that she needed. Then we needed to go and get her a custom tilt and space chair because of how she progressed. So we got that for her, and then I got another referral. And at this time, Miss Kelly was 50 years old. She had the diagnosis of profound intellectual disability, Down syndrome, a GERD or gastroesophageal reflex disease, insomnia, diffuse cerebral atrophy, severe disc degeneration throughout her whole cervical spine, morbid obesity, osteoporosis. She had these really strange myoclonic jerks. And then she had this late onset of Alzheimer's. And that is really the thing that was making her to show a very significant decline. And on top of that, she was totally dependent for everything, but a little firecracker. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so when we saw her, then because of this very significant decline, um, the caregivers were very concerned about these myoclonic jerking that was so severe. I mean, she was arms and legs were just flailing all over the place. But the interesting thing, it was just for a few seconds and then it stopped. Next slide. Okay. So the biggest concern that they had was that they were not able to support her anymore. As it showed in one of the previous slides, she had this thing about insomnia. So she was having a hard time sleeping sometimes. And so she would just lie there. She had these myoclonic jerks, and nothing that they could do could support her. And they were very concerned because of the intensity of these myoclonic jerks, that if she should roll over onto her face, that she cannot correct her position, and that they were afraid that she was just going to smother. And so that we were starting to talk about something that we need to come up for improved breathing for her, because it was a very, very big concern of them. So as we were going through this, obviously our thought process was her safety. I was told by the caregivers at that time that it's so significant that it will move her to the edge of the bed. The other thing was that she had bed rails. So with this flailing, she was at great risk of hitting the bed rails and really hurt herself. So we really wanted to try to reduce the risk for injury. Then the thing that I was just saying, that very high risk for smothering or suffocation, because she was no longer able to lift her face up if she should go face down. And then, she already had a hard time to sleep. So we wanted to be able to provide her with something that will make her comfortable and that would facilitate for her to sleep. And before, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the pictures of what we came up with. And I have to admit, you start off and you have these grandiose ideas and you think, oh, if I do this, if I do this, if I do this. And sometimes that does not help. Sometimes less is better. And that's what we came up with. And the gentleman, the medical equipment fabricator that we had at that time that helped me where this lady is no longer with us, but I want to make sure to recognize all the medical equipment fabricators that we are working with, because we can have the idea, and we laugh many times, Danielle and myself, because we have the idea, and it's for these guys to try to get this idea out of our heads so that they can make it. It's absolutely a job that we cannot do without these amazing guys that we have in our workshop. So let me show you a little bit about a few pictures about Miss Kelly. Okay, there she is. It was during our first appointment. And if you look at
Hey, Estelle,
yes,
just a reminder, you guys stay oriented to the middle of the computer.
okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Anyways, if you look at this picture, you can see even in her body, she had very low tone. So it looks like she was just collapsing on herself. So you can understand that if she then should get onto her stomach, or if her face should get off the pillow, that she would have had a really hard time breathing, and it would have put her at risk of suffocating. Okay, next slide. It's just a little bit close-up picture of what she looked like. I also I forgot to mention, by the time that I saw her, she basically was sleeping all the time. There were very few periods that she was actually alert and awake. So, and though she had the tilt and space wheelchair that we gave her, and they kept her in that, and they would recline her, her time in bed became longer because she was just sleeping. Okay. The next slide, please. Okay. Here was during the simulation. And we were like putting our heads together. And that's, once again, that is one of the benefits of having one of these medical equipment workers, because they have the technical knowledge. We know what we want to obtain in terms of the postural support. We know about the progression of the disease. I knew that it was just going to get worse. And so by putting our heads together, trying all different kinds of things, I think we came up with something, as I said, less is more, something that was really working well for her. Okay, the next picture, please. There she is. Okay. So what we did, we basically make a wedge for her, a pretty long wedge in the back, so that we could support her. Now, this thing could be used on both sides, left and right sided. And we basically made this huge, big body pillow. And you can see she was putting her head on there. There was no way that her head was going to fall off that thing. She could not get it out, her head out, because of the back support. So that took care of the fear that they had that she will roll over. Also, having her arm around this, and there's another picture I'll show you in just a little bit, but we put it between her legs. So even if she was flailing her arms, if it would come down, there was nothing rigid or hard that she could hit herself against. She was really like in a cocoon. That's really what this created. And you can see this was during, I think this was during one of our final fittings. She was that comfortable. This lady that struggled with insomnia and that really could not, that had periods of not being able to sleep, though she was progressing in her disease, that she became very sleepy. She just fell asleep, and she was just completely relaxed. Can we go to the next one, please? Okay. Here you can see more from the top. So it's still, she could still roll a little bit back, but she could try to roll forward, but it was stopping her. She was not going to go anywhere. Okay. The next slide. This is one of my favorite pictures. You know, I have this belief in the clinic. If I put somebody in a piece of equipment and they fall asleep, I'm good. We hit the jackpot. And because if they are uncomfortable in this environment, which is strange to them, they're not going to relax. And I think that this picture, it just speaks 1,000 words. She was comfortable, she was relaxed, she was very safe in this position. Okay, next slide. All right, that just really shows how her legs were positioned. And so she could not kick herself. If she was, if her legs were flailing, she was completely supported. It provided us uh, with some pressure relief between her legs as well, because you don't, they've tried to put pillows and stuff in between her legs, but every time she was kicking, the pillows went flying. And they had to get back in the room to double check, make sure that she was okay. And then I think I have 2 more slides left. We can just look at that. This just gives you a little bit of an idea. So here is the back, and this soft pillow that we had from on the front was connecting with buckles in the back. So it could not pull apart. It could be adjusted. It was clipped out whenever they needed to remove it in order to get her in and out of bed, or to roll her over to the other side. Okay. And then I think that's the last picture. There we go. So that's how her feet were resting. And you will see, it says bottom, it says back. We make sure to make it easier on the caregivers that we really name or mark the different pieces, because you have many people coming in and out of the house. And to make sure that the equipment is really working the way it should, that is part of our responsibility, to make sure that we mark it clearly. And together with this, of course, we do a competence training with the caregivers present to make sure that they know how to use this. And since unfortunately, Miss Kelly passed away approximately 3 weeks after we have delivered this, but as hard as it is to know that somebody has passed away, I think the cool thing for me was knowing that we were able to meet our objectives. We kept her safe. She was comfortable up until the end. And even the caregivers that I spoke to later said it was really a good piece of equipment. So once again, this was very simple from where we started until where we ended. But this has been very effective. All right.
So you increased her safety and her comfort level.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Those
Yes.
outcomes.
And it really helped the caregivers, because they were afraid every time they leave the room. What if she rolls over? Because the
Right.
pillows were collapsing. But with this, there was nowhere for her to go. And I think it just made the care of Miss Kelly so much easier as well. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay. I
I
don't have
can't
good
see
luck with
you,
this.
but I can hear
Yeah,
you.
I turned it off so that I could get closer to the microphone without
Okay.
issues.
Okay. That's
So
great.
I'm gonna talk to you today about what we call a POF, which is a prone arm forearms. So what this equipment does is it just gets somebody off of their bottom, helps them stretch out. There's so many benefits to this type of equipment for people. The young lady that I'm going to speak to you about today, her name is Ashley, and she's 39 years old. Um, you can see all her diagnoses there, but the main thing for her was the scoliosis, and you'll see pictures of her back in here. But her big issues started in February of 2021. She had a bowel obstruction and had to be hospitalized. Um, with all that, she required surgical intervention, and while she was in the hospital, she started having the breakdown on her back. And you can see here she requires assistance for her activities of daily living, but she is a power wheelchair user and she's independent with her mobility. Also dependent for transfers. So our concerns for Miss Ashley was that she has a lot of postural asymmetries in her back. She's got the skin breakdown. That's a huge issue for her. She was received outpatient wound care for a very long time. It was just like they could get it to heal a little bit and then it would just open back up. So she didn't have any alternative positioning. And the main thing that I was concerned about was her home. To get from her hallway to her bedroom, a legit 90-degree turn, and that's just really hard to manage and maneuver equipment in that type of space. So I think I picked some pictures of here of Ashley's back. She just got a lot going on. She's had some surgeries and things like that. You can show the next one. And so you can see her back kind of bulges out right there. And you can see why she got skin breakdown, because when she's on a surface, that area makes the most contact and gets the most pressure. And I did put some pictures of the breakdown that we had, that she had to deal with on her back. So this is probably not even the worst photo, but you can kind of see where the issue was. And then that was toward the end on the right. It was getting a lot better. And then I put some pictures of her home. So this is her hallway. Her bedroom is at the far end on the left. So you can imagine how tough it would be to have a piece of equipment that's the length of her body get through that small space there. So our thought process was that she needs a positioner. She needs to get off of her back and off of her bottom, and this is such a good position to stretch out your hips. There's a lot of benefits to being in prone, but the issue is that the new equipment needed to fit through her bedroom door, because the plan was for her to transfer a rolling transfer from her bed to the equipment. Um, Ashley has very good use of her upper extremities, so she can help with the transfer and help get herself positioned. So for her, the easiest way to get into the equipment was from her bed. And so I spoke to our shop supervisor here, Marion, and I said, "Hey, I've got some concerns, and please don't tell me that I can't do this or it's impossible, because I really need this for this young lady." And so I told him about the constraints of her hallway and her doorway. And so he actually he designed in his head and in the computer. We made her piece of equipment two separate detachable components. So the arm support is one component, and then the trunk and leg support is a separate, so that it comes apart and the total length of the equipment is much shorter and much easier to manage. And then I've got some pictures of her on the equipment. So there she is. She is a social butterfly. She loves to play games on her phone. So it was very important for her that we made like a little holder for her phone so she can lay that on there. But so you can see, she's getting total pressure off of her bottom and her back here. And she's getting her legs stretched, and she's weight bearing on her arms and her stomach, which is very good for people who have GERD or constipation issues. And she picked the colors. She wanted a rainbow of colors, and I said, absolutely. Okay, in the next picture, so you can see this is the piece of equipment detached. So the arm support is just lying on top of the equipment there. And so if you want to show the next picture, Karen. So the arm support, you can see on the right picture, there's two little slots there. And the popsicle sticks, as Andrew calls them, on the arm piece just slide right in to the equipment. And so it's easy for her caregivers to put it together, and easier for her. It's working well for her. She can get into it great from her bedroom, and she's not having any issues.
And so Danielle, that whole piece of equipment there was put together by our staff in the seating and positioning clinic. Am I understanding correctly?
You are correct. Everything was made here at our clinic and in the shop.
Wow. That great work on that case, man. That she must have been much more comfortable after having had that piece of equipment.
She certainly was.
All right. Very good. I guess we're moving on to Andrew Hinkle now.
Moving on to me. You can hear me, correct? All right, good,
Yes,
good.
yes.
Okay, so yeah, just great stuff coming out of the shop, and hopefully this will be another interesting one. This is a young lady named Liana. We call this the expandable custom reversible side liar, so that's a mouthful, but we had a lot of fun making it. It was a really great process. We can go to the next slide. And you can see Liana. This is Liana has been to our clinic in the West region for a number of years now. Two, I guess, visits overall, but this is how she came to us in 2019. She was 18 years old. We can go to the next slide. And so we initially evaluated her back in August of 2019. She was 18. She's currently 21. She has a unique setup at home in the sense that her primary caregiver is her great-grandmother, and for a long time has only been her great-grandmother. She was removed from her rural school system at about 16 years old, and I'll get into some of those issues in a few minutes. And the only supported positioning she had was custom molded seating. And you can see from that picture there that just like Karen was talking about earlier with what we call wind sweeping of the hips, she is a pretty good example of that. And in her mold, when she first came to us, she had that. So she, has her obviously her knees are going towards the right side and her body leans towards the right side. And that's her in that article, the SMARticle, I should say, Karen told us about. That's her preferred position. That's what her body's doing with gravity. And, the preferred position isn't always optimal for a whole host of reasons we can talk about here as we talk about her case. We can go to the next slide, Karen. So initial concerns in 2019 was, Liana's postural asymmetry, and that just means the curvature of her trunk and the movement of her knees towards the right side. Another big concern was her great-grandmother's lack of resources, which really centered on transportation. She made it to our clinic, I believe, 2 times before we figured out that she was going to be best served if we went to her house. And then a third major concern at that time was a history of injury in the school system, according to the great-grandmother. I don't know a whole lot about it, and kind of probably still don't know a whole lot about that experience, but I know it created a historical sort of decrease in trust with caregivers in general. So we had to build trust with Liana and her primary caregiver, her great-grandmother. So when you're looking at Liana and she only has, this custom mold that isn't probably totally meeting her needs because she had some growth in 2009, before 2019, we needed to first get approval for some new custom seating. So that's what we centered on first in 2019. We can go to the next slide, Karen. Let's go to the next slide. We have a chance. So I'll just keep it. So anyways, we followed up the new wheelchair seating system with approval also for some bed positioning for her. There's a good picture of how she ended up in her new mold that we made. So that is her new mold that we made in the clinic, and it's on a new frame, and we customized her arm supports. We also did some bed positioning for her as well. The reason we went from the custom mold to the bed positioning in 2019 was because we wanted her to have as much supported positioning as possible in that time frame. And obtaining insurance approval can sometimes be tricky, and we wanted to make sure we were getting her supported through as many hours of the days that we could. I think the next slide maybe shows some of that bed positioning we did in 2019. Let's see. It'll show her, and she'll be lying. Yeah, there it is. She's lying on her back, and she's actually has some wedges underneath her trunk to sort of align her up. And then the next slide is sort of a feet first view and gives you an idea of how we were trying to align her hips and her trunk as best we could. We obviously we want to, and that, yeah, and there's her in sideline. So we also did some sideline pieces, and she tolerates left sideline the best because she has that, she tends to go to her right. So she really collapses on that left side of her body. So these were all, again, 2019 as a background, these were all done to support the great-grandmother who had very limited support at the time, be able to position her as optimally as possible. And the great-grandmother was able to, because Liana is dependent with mobility, she was able to put her in these positions at night and during the day, during rest periods. So that brings us to 2021. So we'll go to the next slide. And I think in a previous CCN, Dr. Davis, one of our other seating and positioning colleagues, JD, had talked about how we follow up periodically, and all of us do that. And we always stayed in contact with the primary caregiver, and there were just ongoing concerns over time that she had about Liana's tendency to move towards her right, and that limited the space between her lower ribs and what we call the pelvic crest, but it's sort of the bones of our pelvis. And we all have this area; it's sort of right under our lower ribs, and you feel a space and some tissue, some soft tissue, and then you can feel the hard bone of your pelvis. Well, that area on her right side was really collapsing, really decreasing a lot. And her great-grandmother was very concerned, actually, initially about the skin in that area. But as Karen brought up in that smarticle, what you see on the outside also affects the inside. And so we were concerned, and it was an ongoing concern about, organ placement. And, if you think about on the anatomically on the right side of our bodies, we have two lungs, a left lung, a right lung. The right lung has 3 lobes. So in that lower rib area, you're really collapsing down on, your airspace. And so we wanted to really open that up if we could. And so we talked to the great-grandmother about that. And the great-grandmother also had some personal health issues at that point, some challenges. And so we had to sort of keep that in mind as well. But she was also very steadfast in her intention to keep caring for Liana. So we had a lot of sort of challenges to think about. I mean, could Liana tolerate side lying in a more aggressive position that our custom side liers present? Could the great-grandmother get her in a side lier? And then could it fit in the home? And then where would it be used in the home? These were all challenges we had to figure out. Let's go to the next slide if we can. And so we completed another evaluation and talked a lot about it, and the challenges were identified. Specifically, great-grandmother had some concerns about the amount of space that it would need in the home. And then also, a big issue actually is that if you think about it, Liana rarely would get out of the house. And so being in her home was important, and being in multiple rooms of her home was very important to the great-grandmother and is a very important thing. So, and they live in a rural area, and she only leaves the home to go to church, which is actually next door. So she literally goes in her wheelchair next door to church. So we wanted to make sure we built something that could be utilized in multiple rooms, that the great-grandmother could actually get it down the hall. And she's very, very hardy lady. I mean, very strong, very active lady. But we still needed to make it easy enough for her to get from room to room. And a little bit like Danielle's picture earlier, there was some space issues. So we'll go to the next slide. I believe that's where so the sequence of events, we basically, we wanted to trial side lying first in one of our, what we call demo side liers, just to make sure Liana could even tolerate side lying as, with a custom side lier. That's a little different, as you'll see in a few more slides down the line here. It's a little different than the bed side lying. Side lying in bed is a great thing, but our custom side liers tend to put people into, just a more aggressive position, honestly. And so we monitored her oxygen saturation. We obviously were monitoring her for any coughing issues, risks with aspiration, signs of aspiration, and issues related to that we need to be aware of. Also, I mean, her nonverbal signals to us. Did she appear comfortable? Kind of like Estelle said earlier, she knew she she had hit the right spot with that equipment with her individual, because they fell asleep and they looked comfortable. And those are the kinds of things we're looking for. So we did 3 actual trials in the home before we even did what's called a spec, which is just a fancy word for when we actually design how we're going to make the side liar. And so we did the spec on the third trial, but then we had to discuss the space concerns with one of our shop guys, and the person who was assigned to it was Eddie, one of our medical equipment fabricators. And I discussed with him the fact that we had a ramp into the home, but we had very tight turning angles from the bedroom to the living room. And it was each room that she was going to use the side liar in had plenty of space. It was just getting from point A to point B. So the clinical specs, and I don't want to get too far into numbers because I don't want anybody to get too bored with this, but we actually needed the side liar to be 56 total inches to be able to lie Liana on. However, it couldn't be 56 inches and make it up and down the hall, and get from room to room. So Eddie had a great idea, and he said, let's make 6-inch extensions on each end to reduce the total length without extensions to 44 inches. And we can see some pictures of this as it was being made. So that's a yardstick on the side liars was being built. So that yardstick would be about 36 inches, and add about another 8 inches there, and you got 44. So that was the base of the side liar. And then on the next slide, you can see we had all these extension pieces that that Eddie made to put on the ends of the side liar to increase its length. Let's go to the next slide, Karen, if we can. Thank you. So this is before it's covered with vinyl, and we also made a extension for her arm, which actually increased the width of the side liar. And then there are a couple other pieces on there that we'll talk about in a minute when we see the finished product. Let's go to the next slide. Thank you. There's Liana and her side liar on delivery. So you can kind of see where the extensions go there, and then also where her arm lays out. Her arm tends to move into extension quite often, and we didn't want to hang it off the side liar. And anything again to engender sort of like confidence with the primary caregiver. It's always been an important part of this process. Let's go to the next slide because I think it's a better picture to kind of delineate. Okay, so when we use side-lying, side-lying is a great position for a lot of reasons, but specifically for Liana, we're really trying to again elongate that area on her right side where the ribs were really approximating her pelvis. And Karen, I'm gonna get you to go back to one slide. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have come off that slide so soon. So you might be able to tell on this particular picture, it looks like we call it a buildup, but there's extra foam that supports her legs and her trunk, but then her arm that she's on that's extended and kind of straight out, it looks like it's on a lower piece. We do that basically, we build up foam there to stretch that top side of her body, the right side of her body, and try to open up that area. And you may be able to tell from this picture and maybe and we don't have to go back, but the previous picture when she was in her bed and side-lying, there is a difference. This is a little bit more aggressive, and it's really, she needed it. It's just it was just sort of a progression of getting to this point. Okay, we can go to the next slide, and there are other pieces of the side liar. You see that sort of half moon shaped positioning piece behind her legs that actually flexes her hip, bends her knees, and sort of that helps to modulate her tone a little bit because she has what's called extensor tone. Her legs want to go straight out a lot. So that sort of helps modulate that tone. It also prevents her from sliding down the side liar. Another question I get a lot about the side liar, and I got from the great grandmother, was, why does it have to be on such an angle? And the reason for that is because we're really, even though she still eats by mouth, we're really worried because of her condition, her cerebral palsy, that she's at risk for aspiration. And so we wanted to put it on an angle, and that's a 20-degree angle. It's about as far as we go, but it usually decreases the risk, well, it does decrease the risk of aspiration. And it almost, it helps, like when you have speech therapy intervention, sometimes people actually eat in their side liar or receive nutrition in their side liar via peg tube feeding. So it can be used for that that reason as well. So let's go to the next slide and we'll talk about, okay, so already to the end. Wow. So so I was kind of like to look back. We all like to look back at what kind of went right up with the situation, what didn't. And I think that I sort of made that final analysis here. You know, I originally wrote a letter of medical necessity to insurance, but they didn't approve the side liar on the first letter, and there were some good reasons for that. So I wrote an appeal letter and addressed some of those concerns, and then they approved it. So I probably could have done a better letter of medical necessity looking back on it, maybe. But anyways, I had a chance to practice my appeal letter. But what went really right here, in my opinion, is that the great-grandmother, first of all, she got a new caregiver, and that is going extremely well. And that's made a huge difference in their life. So she has support now. And they actually have been trained together on how to get Liana in the side liar effectively. And both of them were present throughout the process. So by us going to the home versus them coming to the clinic and messing up any routines and rhythms that they have in their everyday life, we were able to go to the home, and they were present throughout the process. And then really with the great-grandmother, with the primary caregiver, you know, she had ample opportunity to communicate her concerns regarding, you know, what a side liar is and how it would be used. And that really facilitated just a great end result. Because I mean, we're all mindful, all the therapists and shop workers here, we're all mindful that, you know, we're going to people's homes, and, you know, we like to think of our equipment sometimes as furniture for people who really need it. I mean, they're great positioning devices, but they also become kind of part of someone's household, and we have to be respectful and mindful of that. And unfortunately, sometimes there's a lot of, I would say there's a lot, but unfortunately, sometimes there is some equipment abandonment in the community, and we don't want that. We want this to be a piece of equipment that's utilized, like, you know, Estelle and Danielle's clients used, and make sure that it's helping somebody, obviously, and if it's utilized, it will be helpful. And just be respectful of their families, their home space, their family space, their home environment. So any questions? Be happy to take any. Sure, any of us would be. I was watching my time. I didn't want to run over.
No matter what clinical field you're in, you've got to be able to connect with the person you're supporting, and including their extended family in that, because if you don't, you're just going to end up recommending something that doesn't fit their frame. And so I applaud the way that you have engaged the family. I think that's such an important part of any clinical work.
Thank you. Well, we all do. I mean, we all do it. It's you have to. If you want a good result, you have to.
Yeah, I would suggest that has been the case with all of these. And I'm just consistently amazed by the work that people do in the seating and positioning clinics, and the quality of life improvements that people have as a result of it. And for nothing else, you can see it on the people's faces when you get them in this piece of equipment that's so comfortable. I keep thinking to myself, I need to make an appointment for myself to come in and find what my preferred posture is and how to fix that, particularly while I'm sleeping. I always have trouble, staying in a good position when I'm sleeping. So I'm just so impressed with the work that you guys do. I appreciate you so much. And actually, Andrew, you and Danielle are probably getting close to being our 5-timers club. Since she was on here 3 times. Estelle, have you been on before? I can't remember. So this is your first time.
First time, yes.
We will get you back as well, because you're all great presenters. And this trilogy was a lot better than Lord of the Rings, in my opinion.
Thank you.
All right. So thank you all for being here. This is the Clinical Consultation Network. We do it every Tuesday at 12:30. Join us again next week. Thank you all, Andrew, Estelle, Danielle. We'll see you next time.